Okay, we're live. I'm going to go ahead and admit people. Is that okay? Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Good.
Morning.
Good morning.
Let's just share our meeting.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Melita, I'm assuming we're waiting on the commissioner.
Yes, it looks like he's joined us now. We'll give him a moment to settle in. I think looks like we have everyone here. Oh, there's a couple more people joining. We'll just hold a moment. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome to the Health Related Institutions Formula Advisory Committee meeting. My name is Melita Berger. I'm a funding director on the funding and resource planning team at the coordinating board. We're going to start out today with Commissioner Keller providing some opening remarks. So we'll turn it over to him. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Melita. Appreciate it. So welcome and thank you all for your willingness to participate on this committee. Of course, we convene the committee every 2 years and appreciate your work over the fall to study and provide recommendations on appropriate funding levels and additional changes that might be needed related to formula funding. And of course, this work is going to be particularly important as we're coming off a very strong session for higher education, and we want to make sure that we keep that momentum and help inform the upcoming discussions about how they need to continue to invest to improve affordability and to support our institutions. So ultimately, we want to make sure that the financial incentives that are built into the HRI formulas are going to align with our higher education goals and also with our changing workforce needs. And your input, your insights are going to be extremely important to us as we're working on compiling recommendations and informing the deliberations of the appropriators, but also working with the governor's office. So I'll talk briefly about the charges. So the charges that you have are focused to help shape upcoming funding and policy decisions based on some of the recent conversations we've had with policymakers and with the institutions. So, of course, there's a broad charge around considering different funding levels for pharmacy and nursing programs at GIIs and the HRIs. So for HRIs that are affiliated with the GII, some have all their health programs funded via the HRI formula. Others only have medical programs funded. This is an issue that has come up a couple of times and needs to just be explored a little more closely. There's also a charge on the mission-specific formulas. Of course, the number of mission-specific formulas has increased recently. So last session, the legislature funded the mission-specific formulas while providing pretty minimal increases and other formulas for the HRIs. And so that makes it especially ripe to examine these. We've got multiple research-based and clinical-based formulas that speak to the different institutions' capacity for these activities, but that has given a rise to questions from policymakers about what the rationale is and how these differ.
Okay.
And
Appreciate-
that's what we'll talk about that.
Yeah, appreciate your willingness to explore that. So there was one item that came up with the group you won't see as a charge for this committee, but we still are committed to exploring it, working with the institution. So last session, a few of y'all brought forward an issue around a discrepancy in how hours for physical therapy convert to full-time student equivalents compared to hours for occupational therapy. Appreciate y'all raising this issue. That also raised some larger issues in how doctoral programs are classified as research or professional practice degrees. Instead of including that as a charge for this committee, so our academic and health affairs team is working on a comprehensive review of that issue over the next few months. And so our team will be working in consultation with academic affairs officials at the system offices so we can determine how we treat those doctors. So the intent is to provide an update to this committee in around the kind of November, December timeframe with the goal of having any changes in place by the spring. Now I'll wrap up because I know you have a lot to get through, but I did want to say many of y'all know that before I have the privilege of taking on this role as commissioner, so I did have the opportunity to serve a couple of times on the General Academic Institutions Formula Advisory Committee. So I know firsthand, and I appreciate the work that you're going to have to put in over a pretty short period of time. And as I told the GAI committee, when I served on the Formula Advisory Committee, and in all candor, I found those discussions a little frustrating because my strong impression is that recommendations were already pretty well baked by the agency staff. So a lot of times I felt like we didn't have a lot of opportunity to explore new directions. And I just want to assure you all that is not the case with this committee. So as I told your colleagues in the community colleges 2 years ago and told your colleagues for the general academic institutions yesterday, so our agency team and I are happy to take this work as far as you all are willing to go together. So if you want to focus on sort of more incremental changes around the margins, that's going to be your prerogative. But if you want to take on some more ambitious work that you feel like would give you some more room to innovate your programs, better align with the mission of the institutions, and better address our changing demographics and workforce needs, we'd be happy to partner with you in that work as well. So again, I really appreciate your willingness to take this work on and be happy to answer any questions you might have before you dive into the agenda. Right. Sounds like
Thank you.
Sure. It sounds like there's a groundswell that y'all have heard enough from me at this point. So I'll turn it back over to y'all and thank you all again.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Again, good morning. I'd like to let the fun begin. I'd like to call the Health Related Institutions Formula Advisory Committee meeting to order. I welcome all the committee members, and this is somewhat of a unique session this go round, in that half of our members are brand new to the committee. Half of the 14 are returning members. So we've got a little bit of new ideas, new blood, as well as some folks who have some experience in the process in the past. And thank you for participating. I am Michael Tremonti. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at the UT Health Science Center in Houston, or UT Health Houston. And I'm convening the meeting as the former committee chair. Please be advised that the meeting is being broadcast over the internet and recorded. So I'd ask all attendees to silence your phones, your cell phones, and mute the Zoom unless speaking. With that, because we have new people, a lot of new folks, instead of just doing a roll call. I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourself. Melita will basically call upon you, and then you can fill in the rest.
All right, good morning. Well, we would begin with Dr. Chase, but I understand she's unable to be here. She has a representative here. If you'd like him to introduce himself.
Sure, I'm Jim Briggs, Associate Provost for Faculty Affairs at the University of Houston, representing again Dr. Chase.
Thank you. So then we would turn to Ms. Gomez-Leon.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Gomez-Leon. I'm the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at UT Health Houston, San Antonio. Sorry, Mike. San Antonio, yeah.
Okay, great. And then we would turn to Mr. Guajardo.
Morning, everybody. Tomas Guajardo, AVP State System Reporting with UT Anderson Cancer Center.
Good morning. And now Ms. Harkey.
Good morning. I'm Penny Harkey. I'm the Executive Vice President of Finance and Operations at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center.
Ms. Harms.
Hi, Natalie Harms, Vice President of Finance, UT Health Science Center Tyler and UT Tyler.
Dr. Lang, I believe, was going to be arriving a bit late, unless there's a representative here for Dr. Lang.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Fisher. I'm representing Dr. Lang for TTU HSC El Paso. I'm the VP of Finance and Administration.
Thank you. We would turn to Mr. Lewis.
Good morning. My name is Kemp Lewis. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for UNT Health Science Center.
Good morning. Ms. Marin Hill.
Good morning, Angelica Marine Hill, Vice President for Government Affairs and Policy at UT Southwestern.
Dr. Moray.
Good morning, Mike Morey. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for University of Texas Dell Medical Center and the Chief Health Strategist for the University of Texas.
Mr. Mueller.
I'm Michael Miller, Executive Vice President for Finance and Business Affairs and Chief Financial Officer for UTRGV.
Ms. Nace.
Good morning. I'm Kristen Nace, Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at the A&M Health Science Center.
Ms. Shear.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Shear with UTMB Health, VP for Legislative Affairs.
And Mr. Tremonte has already introduced himself. We go to Ms. Withers.
Hi, I'm Amanda Withers. I am the Chief Financial Officer and Senior Vice President for Operations at St. Houston.
Great. We have a quorum to proceed. Thank you.
Okay. A quorum is present. So there is one, I guess, little bit of housekeeping or at least update. You may be all aware that that Mr. Kemp Lewis will be representing North Texas Health Science Center, although not officially a member, a voting member at this point. The coordinating board will consider his nomination to the Formula Advisory Committee at the October meeting. I make a motion that until that time, Mr. Lewis would participate as a non-voting member. Will all in favor please say aye?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much. So item 4 on our agenda is the election of the committee chair, vice chair, and secretary. At this time, I'd like to open the floor for nomination of the committee chair. If you'd like to nominate someone, please state your name for the record and your nomination. I'm sure someone just has their line muted currently.
Mike, I figured you had it all figured out. You were just going to throw it out there.
My name is Jenny Gomez-Leon, and I would love to renominate Mr. Mike Tremonti as chair of the Formula Advisory Committee.
Second.
Boy, that was quick. It's I didn't even have to ask for a second. It's okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a vote? All in favor, please say aye.
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 If there's a groundswell opposed, please speak up now. Please. Okay. Hearing none. I will accept that nomination, and let's do this again. It was so fun last time. It's okay. Our next order of business now that I've transitioned from former to newly elected is to nominate the vice chair. And so if I could have a nomination, again, please state your name for the record and your nomination.
Good morning. My name is Tomas Guajardo, and I would like to nominate Kristen Nays from A&M Health Science Center for vice chair.
Any additional nominations? Kristen, do you consent to the nomination?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, great. So Kristen Nace has been nominated for the position of vice chair. At this point, if I could have a all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Welcome, Kristen. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, lastly is our position of secretary. And with that, I'd like to open the floor up to nominations for that role.
I'd like to nominate Tomas Guajardo as secretary for this position.
Okay. Any other nominations? Tomas, would you consent to the nomination?
Be honored and happy to help. Yes.
Great. So Tomas Guajardo has been nominated for the position of secretary. With that, I'd like to ask for a second.
Second.
Okay. And for all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Please, same sign. Okay, hearing none. We have a secretary. Thank you, Tomas. Okay. Item 5 is a briefing on the formula funding. And Ms. Melita Berger, Senior Director of State Funding Policy, will provide the information.
All right, thank you. Got our intro slide. So I'll provide an overview of health-related institution formula funding. Next slide, please. So the GAIs and the HRIs are defined differently in statute. According to statute or by the General Appropriations Act, the GAIs are typically the four-year institutions and the upper-level institutions. The HRIs can be standalone institutions or a distinct part of a GAI. Texas has 37 GAIs and 14 public HRIs, and of the 14 HRIs, 6 are part of a GAI. The classifications are used for state reporting and funding purposes. And this is also some context that's provided related to the co-charge that you'll deal with. I believe it's charge 3. I'd move to the next slide. Here we have an overview of formula funding. Formula funding in this state and most states is essentially an allocation of equitably and to objectively allocate the funding that is available for the institutions. So in an allocation methodology and what is typically done, the legislature backs into a rate based on the available funding they have remaining in the budget that they determine should go to higher education. During session, the legislature divvies up the amount available for the formulas among the institutions using data submitted to the coordinating board, which is predominantly enrollment-based, but also includes other factors such as research expenditures or outcome metrics. This results in a rate for the funding formulas depending on the applicable metrics used in the calculation. Alternatively, the formulas can also be used as an informative tool to drive funding to institutions and fund increases in students that institutions typically see year over year, or otherwise known as funding the rate. Next slide, please. Many formulas use a base period to set funding for the next biennium. Generally, the legislature uses whatever is the most recently available data for each of the drivers related to the formulas. So for the I&O formula, the initial projection is based on spring, summer, and fall data. Final I&O appropriations uses full-time student equivalents generated during the summer and fall of even-numbered years and the spring of odd-numbered years when the legislature is finalizing the appropriations bill. Schools that are going through fast growth sometimes have to wait a 2-year cycle for their funding to catch up with them, depending on when the growth occurs. Next slide, please. The Instruction and Operations Support, or I&O formula support, it supports instructional operations and institutional support. The I&O formula is driven by both semester credit hours and student headcount enrollment, depending on the program. Medical and dental students are funded off of headcount, while the remainder of the programs, pharmacy, nursing, et cetera, are based on semester credit hours converted into a full-time student equivalent. I should add, podiatry is also funded through headcount, and that was a change that was implemented last session, and it was a recommendation of the Formula Advisory Committee. The full-time student equivalents are weighted to reflect differences in cost related to different programs. Medical and dental are weighted the highest, while allied health is funded at a weight of 1.0. This weighting is static for each biennium, except for when a new program has been added by the legislature. Additionally, the formula includes a supplement for remote locations with small program sizes, known as the small class supplement. This is limited to programs with enrollments of less than 200 students at individual remote campuses and UT Health Science Center's Tyler's main campus. Next slide, please. The infrastructure formula supports facility operations and utilities. The infrastructure formula is based on predicted square feet, which comes from the space projection model done annually by the coordinating board. This estimates the amount of space an institution needs by taking into account its semester credit hours taught, faculty and staff size, research expenditures, and other metrics. The predicted square feet is intended to be an equitable assessment of space need. I would note that while this model mostly is unrelated to actual square footage, it does take into account the actual clinical space at an institution. The research enhancement formula is as it sounds and is intended to foster increased research capacity across the institutions. All institutions receive a base amount and then a percentage, a percentage of their most recent expenditures. The graduate medical education is to provide funding for residents and to support the faculty costs related to training these residents. This is based simply on the number of medical and podiatric residents as of September 1 in the fall of the year prior to the legislative session. The podiatric residents were included for the first time in the 24-25 biennium. Next slide, please. Here we show the mission-specific formula funding and the implementation year of the programs. The legislature heavily invested in the mission specifics this last session with $64 million in supplemental funding and $103 million increase in direct 24-25 appropriations. Next slide, please. General revenue formula funding amounts, excluding mission specifics, increased by $88.6 million for the 24-25 biennium. If you take out the mission specifics and look at formula increases over time, it shows marginal growth each biennium. The last legislature provided an increase that was substantial. However, $34 million of it was related to the formula funding of Sam Houston State College Osteopathic School due to the lifting of the statutory prohibition on receiving formula funding. Next slide, please. Despite increases in funding, formula rates have remained relatively flat. As you can see in 24-25, the rates have gone up slightly for the INO rate, and the space model rate stayed the same. Next slide. As you are all aware, the coordinating board is required by statute to provide recommendations on higher ed formulas to the LBB and governor's office each summer prior to a legislative session. Statute requires us to use a committee review process to receive expert input on these topics, and that is where we come up with the formula advisory committees. Your committee works through the fall and sends the recommendations to the commissioner, and then they ultimately move forward to our board after commissioner consideration. So the way these recommendations are used are really as overall signals from the institutions to the board on what state policymakers should consider in setting higher ed financing policy. And then finally, our Educational Data Center, or EDC, works with institutions on reporting student and course data to us that we can provide to the LBB and governor's office in the fall before legislative session and spring during legislative session for their use in the appropriations process. On a practical level, the data is provided in alignment with the recommendations made to the legislature by our board, but we also provide other options as requested by legislative offices. Next slide. Here we've listed the charges for your information. And if there are any questions, I try to answer them now. All right, if not, I think I would turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. So at this point in time, I'd like to really walk through our charges. It's a fairly, seems like in comparison to prior years, it's a little longer than what we've normally had. The one that is the fairly standard charge that we certainly can't leave without providing recommendations, and certainly wouldn't want to, is the study and to make recommendations for the appropriate funding levels for the instruction and operation, or the INO formula, the infrastructure formula, research enhancement, and graduate medical education, and the mission specific formulas. These, historically we've handled this at last. Well, let me step back. Last session, we brought forward a recommendation to get them adjusted for inflation. We were successful with Dr. Keller and with the board themselves to bring forward to the LBB. So I think in that respect, I thought we did a fairly compelling job of bringing the issue forward. In years prior, if you had a chance to really to digest that graph of the former rates, it used to be our desire to get back to the 2000 levels base rates, which were in excess of $11,000 per FTSC back then. So we've sort of shifted away from that to make it a little more analytical. To aid in the committee's recommendation of the appropriate levels of funding, the staff has provided information for the health-related institutions, including comparative graphs and charts on pages 5 through 12 of the agenda materials. At this point in time, I'd like to open it up for comments and discussion. Okay, this is something that this charge will be dealt with by the entire subcommittee. It obviously impacts everyone, so it's important that everybody has a voice in our approach moving this forward. Not saying that everybody won't have a voice in every one of the charges. Charge 2 is to study and make recommendations for the appropriate I&O formula weights, including consideration of any new specialty programs for inclusion. And in this, page 6 of your materials include a descriptive chart on formula weights. To provide a little background, excuse me, last session's committee began looking at allied health and whether or not there should be a separate rate for graduate as opposed to undergraduate. We ran out of time, unfortunately, and tabled that discussion for this year. And so it's my recommendation that similar to last time, we form a work group to focus on charge 2 and ask that group to bring forward a recommendation on I&O formula weights, as well as any new specialty programs. Both nursing and allied health are 2 areas that have come to mind as far as some significant disparities and cost of providing those programs. Again,
Mike, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the commissioner mentioned something about OTPT? How is that related? I don't think I understand that versus this allied health charge.
Well, that's a good question. It is my understanding that the OTPT issue is being reviewed at a higher level and a more broad basis, so as to go beyond just OTPT. And so in that respect, I don't know that we're asking the working group to focus on FTSC definition or anything like that. It really is a matter of weight definition. Now, Emily Cormier, is that accurate, or could you provide a little more insight?
Sure. So Penny, during session, a few of the schools who have PT programs and OT programs brought to us that for one program, they're converted to an FTSC using 18 semester credit hours as the conversion metric. And for the other, it uses 24 semester credit hours as the conversion metric. And what it relates to is whether it's classified as a doctoral program that's a professional practice or a doctoral program that's considered a research doctoral program. And so when they brought this forward, they said, this doesn't make sense that they would be converted on a different FTSC conversion rate. And so it has kind of bigger picture implications relating to the federal classifications and kind of how we classify all doctoral programs. So that's being looked at by our academic and health affairs office on kind of how doctoral programs get classified as professional or research and what's the appropriate conversion metric there. So that's kind of separate and distinct happening elsewhere in the agency. And so this charge is more focused on the weights for that are used in the I&O formula. Not sure if that answers your question, but happy to provide anything else there is.
It does answer the question. Just am trying to, that will just be information that comes back to us as a ruling from the coordinating board of how these will be classified. Is that a correct statement?
building feels very, very strong, but probably after consulting with other academic affairs in each of the systems, I think come back with a recommendation for it for people to know about.
Mike, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you for keeping me honest here, Mike. It's okay. Any other comments on that? I appreciate Emily your insight on that issue.
I don't know if this is what you're looking for, Mike, but I would be interested in continuing to explore a weight for the graduate programs amongst all of the allied health programs. Okay. And if we would be interested in looking at nursing too, happy to explore that as well too.
Okay, so if okay with everyone, I think as I work through this, you're going to find that there'll be probably a need for 3 working groups, and with that, what I would offer to the group as a possibility is have everyone, and we're missing a few people, so we don't want to make sure we miss anybody, but have everybody submit sort of in rank order which working group they'd like to be on. Sort of a first, second, and third choice, with the idea of trying to, excuse me, to spread the representation of the committee members across the various work groups, so that we have a balance of both newer members and older members, and in some cases, those that currently only have a medical school versus the I guess, for lack of a better term, the more mature, broader based health related institutions. So, excuse me, with that, let me go ahead and move on to charge 3, because that is where we will, this is probably the biggest. It's a co-charge with the academic formula funding committee, and it is to study and make recommendation on the treatment of health-related programs at general academic institutions co-located with health-related institutions. Specifically, and Dr. Keller referenced this, the pharmacy and nursing programs possible. However, I wouldn't necessarily limit it in that respect.
So, Mike, I have a quick question, and maybe the coordinating board can help. But what's the focus here? What's the end goal in terms of a recommendation coming out of the joint committee? Are we looking at, because this goes back, and when I guess 10 years ago, probably longer than that, this issue, and I've got a lot of history on this, and so I'm just, are we looking at equalizing the rate per student, both on a general academic campus versus a health related campus? Is that what the focus of the charge is? Is it fair to say that?
Well, my takeaway is, and whichever way we come down, is to provide a solid substantiation of an approach, whether it's moving over. I mean, the one thing that as I've looked at the different formula calculations, they are dramatically different. And so the question would be is, okay, let's have the group, certainly our group, identify, what is the magnitude of the implications? What does this mean? And because frankly, I don't think it can be viewed in a vacuum. It's just not these programs only. I think those who've been on the committee recognize that you add FTSEs, it impacts the rest of the members.
It
And-
does, Mike, and you know, I'm just going to put, you know, as Jenny did, you know, be part of a group. I'd like to be part of this subcommittee, because I think the one thing that I like for this group to know is that, and just put this out there in space because it will be brought up in the discussions, is that the dollars that we're funding the programs, nursing and pharmacy specifically, because they're mentioned in the charge, are still in the general academic formula. The problem that I see, and it's always been there since the implementation of this, is the cost matrix, and how the general academics are reporting their cost, and how that is affecting that cost matrix and their weights, and shifting dollars that were once funding these programs to different areas. So I'd love to be part of that conversation, to bring some history to it, some background, if that's all right. But
Sure.
I'll stop
No,
there.
absolutely. It's, you know, I think that again, that it's one thing to look at it conceptually.
Mhm.
It's another to look at it as, okay, how would the funding be impacted? Again, is it a lift and shift? We move money from academics to health related. You know, those are some of the great unknowns. And again, hopefully something that the work group can bring forward as, okay, here's current issues, roadblocks, concerns, and our recommendation overall.
I appreciate that. I think if to help that committee is to have a more definitive, what is the ultimate outcome, to hone that in a bit more, so we can address that and bring all those issues up.
And as one of the newer members, I'd also like to participate in this subcommittee. I think it is an idea that has been around for a long time, and I'd like to explore various options with it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Okay. All good comments, and I appreciate the volunteers. I got a feeling this one's going to be a popular one. It's a it is something that I think that, as Mike had mentioned, it's an issue that's been batted around for at least a handful of biennia. Okay, probably since 2000 when the formula was created. But what the heck?
It's been since 2000, since that first, and Penny can jump in here, but I think it's been since that first formula run. But it wasn't so much so until what I call the line of demarcation with the cost matrix. And then you can see that shift between those programs. But there's a lot of history there that I think that educating both the newer members on the general academic side and us, you know, here on our committee, I think need that background and to come up with, but I still think to come up with the recommendation, for me personally, need to have that charge honed in is, I mean, for me right now, it just reads as a report. I mean, is there a particular outcome where there legislative members looking to have equal funding rates because I can't argue the fact, and I'm probably getting too far into it. We need a different discussion at a different time, but the cost for providing pharmacy education on a health-related institution versus a general academic institution are going to be similar, but it's how those costs have been allocated through that cost matrix is really creating a problem. And so I don't want to have to go back to, or in this committee, and just say, okay, GAIs, you've got to focus your efforts through the cost matrix. So if we could just have that honed in a bit more.
Okay, we'll try to get some additional guidance in that respect. Okay, any other discussion before we move on to charge 4? Okay, so charge 4 is to study and make recommendations on eligibility of remote sites for purposes of the small class supplement. And on page 15 of the materials, there's a summary of the sites eligible for the small class supplement. When I asked for a little bit of additional guidance on that, I was told that potentially, you know, there's a reference to a multi-campus adjustment the infrastructure side. And frankly, I think historically there hasn't been an effort to align that which is identified on the small class supplement site with the multi-campus adjustment sites. And I think that very well may be what we will be focusing on this charge. So that's again, my recommendation is this is something we deal with on the bigger committee basis. Comments or concerns or thoughts? Okay, the charge 5 is the study and to make recommendations on the use of the mission specific formula funding at health related institutions. And that may include a review of the implementation of similar research and or clinical based mission specifics across the institutions. And on page 17 of the materials, there's a summary of the funding for the mission specific formulas. As you'll find, because I think there's dates attached, they have evolved from biennium to biennium to biennium. And so it is my recommendation that this is our third work group that we would pull together so that a smaller group could focus on the issues around the mission specific, what's been in, what led to creation, how they were funded, and so on. Any questions, thoughts, concerns regarding that? So let me pause for a second and ask for whether there's any comments. We've identified that we would establish 3 work groups. Is there a need to establish an addition, any other work groups for any of the other charges, or is everybody comfortable that would be sufficient to tackle those that probably are going to be a little more labor intensive?
I think it makes sense for my end. I had a question. So you said submit an email. I don't know what this means, submit the email to for our preferences, assuming the group decides 3 is the proper number. And who do we get that to, and is there a deadline for that? So I'm assuming the work we would allow to get together before the next meeting.
Good question. So Tomas, as secretary, I think you would be the perfect recipient of the emails from each of our members. So we'll certainly communicate contact information for everyone. I think the list didn't necessarily include emails, but we'll send that out to the committee so that everyone has everyone's email address. And if you can submit to Tomas, again, your first, second, and third choice, we will then try to compile everything and make sure we've got good representation across all the work groups. Okay, any other, needless to say, I think it's going to be a fun-filled fall. With that, our next agenda item is talking about our future meeting dates. And I guess one of the questions I have, prior to COVID, the meetings themselves were typically in person. We would go to the coordinating board's office and we would meet in person. Oftentimes we'd find that the meetings were quick. And so I think with COVID, we started to take advantage of virtual meetings, and they were pretty productive as well. With one of the things that I've had noticed was, unfortunately, as you may have encountered with a lot of virtual meetings, there's not quite the networking opportunities that are available. And so I would at least like to entertain the idea of at least having one in-person meeting, at least give people an opportunity to meet each other and just learn who they're a little bit more about the people they're working with. Is there any opposition to that? Okay, well, hearing none, that one of the challenges that we have, or opportunities that we have, is when the meetings are virtual, the demands are less. There's no room demands. And so initially, I think the 26th, 27th, and 28th have been identified of September, have been identified as potential meeting sites. The one question I would have is, do we want to wait until the end of September to really get the ball rolling? Or would it be better to really maybe have that first meeting, if possible, in mid-September? And since I think the rooms are available at the end of September, maybe that first meeting is virtual, and maybe whether it's let's see, September. Okay, September 15th, I believe, September 13th is a Wednesday. I would like to offer up that perhaps we shoot for a 10 o'clock time frame on the 13th, if that would work for everybody. Or if there's a better date, I'm open to that as well.
And just to clarify, Mike, that's a face-to-face you're talking about?
Well, I think that would be virtual.
Okay.
Just because I think we're hard pressed to necessarily find a room. And then with the idea that maybe on the 26th, we would have well, is there a better day for all on the 26th or 27th or 28th? I'm perfectly fine with Wednesday the 27th at 10 o'clock.
My preference would be for the 27th also.
That sounds great to me.
Okay.
Mike, sorry to be a fly in the ointment. I have a full Hill Visits day on September 13th. Is that the only option for the first meeting?
No, not at all. If we'd like to do it, is the 12th better?
No, I'm there on the 12th and the 13th. Sorry about that.
Okay. How about the 14th?
14th. We've got a winner on.
Will the 14th work for everybody else?
Yes, sounds good to me.
Sorry, Mike, I can't do the 14th. I'm traveling to Galveston and in meetings all day down there. So the 14th, unfortunately, does not work for me.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, since we're scrambling a little bit, we'll send out a meeting note and see if we can't find a good day. And again, this is sort of off schedule. So whether it's the 11th, the 15th, or whatever, we'll give people options, and we'll see where we can find something that works for everybody. Ideally, the next meeting would be November 1st or 2nd. Is there a preference for one date versus the other?
November 1 for me, but I could make either date work.
First would be
Any
great.
pro- any problems with November 1 for anybody?
No.
Okay, let's go with that. And as of right now, you know, depending upon the outcome of the 27th, we may decide that, hey, we want to stick with in person, or we may determine that the first needs to be virtual. So we can play that one by ear. The next meeting schedule would be the 29th or 30th.
My preference would be the 30th.
Okay. Any opposition to the 30th? Okay, let's pencil in the 30th. Once we get beyond November, those are oftentimes become as needed, but let's, as of right now in the agenda, we've identified potentially the 6th or 7th of December. And again, at that point in time, it also may just be some wordsmithing, so it's probably going to be a virtual meeting. That would be my guess. Is the 6th or 7th better for, how about the 6th? Is that okay?
That would be my preference.
Okay. Lastly would be January, and again, I'd be surprised if we'd have that meeting or need that meeting, but just in case, just to put it on people's calendar, how does the 10th look?
That works.
Okay, let's plan on doing that. Okay, as so the focus of our meeting in mid-September will be to announce committee membership or work group membership, and any discussion that, you know, where we may want to make some adjustments. Also, at that point in time, you know, I'd like to send out some information to all the committee members regarding the current year's formula calculations, just so you're familiar with the tools, as well as last session's report, so that you can see what report we provided last year. What you'll find if you look year over year over year, there are certain common themes, common formatting type things that are there, and so, you know, we're not starting necessarily from scratch every session, but at least get that in your hands, and we can have some conversation regarding approach on that. Okay, we are coming up on the hour. Are there any further questions, points of discussion, thoughts for the group?
I wondered if I might just go back over the dates and make sure we all have a common understanding of what was discussed briefly. I think you're proposing or looking at September 11th or 15th, a date in that week to meet virtually.
Right.
And then September possibly 27th, would that be in person?
That would be in person.
Great. And then November 1st, in person?
To be determined.
To be determined. And then November 30th. Sorry, would that be virtual, or I'm not sure yet?
Not sure. My guess is we'll probably find that we'll do virtual, but okay, you never know. Everybody may prefer to get together, and especially when it comes to start talking about the work group findings or recommendations. it might be beneficial to have everybody in person.
Gotcha. And then December 6th, it looks like virtual, and January 10th, possibly virtual, TBD.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other comments or concerns, if I could have a motion to adjourn. Okay, Tomas, motion, a second?
Second.
Okay, Lauren. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Right at 11 o'clock. How's that for timing?
Strong work.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.